Welcome to Centerpoint. My name is Mary and we're so glad you're here. No matter where you're tuning in from, you're always welcome here at Centerpoint. If you'd like to connect with us, all you have to do at any time is text HELLO to 604-265-5670 and one of our team members will be ready to message you back and help you with anything that you need or any question that you have. To join us in person, we meet weekly at the Chief Sepass Theater at 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings, and we'd love to see you there. For more info about our services and more about our church, all you have to do is go to thisiscenterpoint.org. Here's Josh with our sermon series, Making Space.
Now, all month long, we've been talking about making space, and which is margin. And what we've been chatting about is that we don't want our lives, our current pace, to be at our limits all the time because we get frustrated, we have things like burnout, or we have breakdowns, which is when we're just operating at our limit all the time. And so we've been talking about how do we create margin in our life, how do we create space so that we're not burning the candle at both ends all the time, that we are actually on time for our appointments. And I'm going to laugh right now because it's this kind of Murphy's Law thing. When you teach something on a Sunday, it just happens during the week. And so I had an appointment that somebody was waiting at my door for me to go for a walk, and I was 2 minutes late. And I just thought, oh, great, they're going to throw margin in my face. And they did. No, they didn't. They were gracious. But it's the ability to be early to appointments. It's the ability to have breathing room in our finances, to be able to have money left over at the end of the month, that when we hit an emotional bump, it doesn't bottom us out for days and days and days, but we have resiliency. This is some of the benefits of creating space. And so today we're going to talk about the most valuable resource that we have. The most valuable resource that we have, if you didn't know this, is time. And so we're going to talk about our time. How do we make space in our time, in our schedules? How do we create breathing room? Because marginless living usually takes its toll on us relationally, financially, emotionally, and spiritually. And so today I wanted to conclude with this message and start from a place where a man named Moses 3,400 years ago, now if you can imagine that, wrote about time. You see, we think that in all of our new methodology or with our new technology, that yes, in some ways we're able to live longer, we're able to be more efficient, but at the same time, it seems as though we struggle to understand the limited nature of our time. And it's in our inability to wrestle with and to confront our limited nature that when we don't think about our time, we kind of just squander it. And so Moses is going to lean into this. It's the oldest psalm that we find in a book called Psalms. Maybe if you're new to Christianity or you haven't really had somebody read the Bible with you, you might be psalms. Okay, that ends up happening to a lot, and you all laugh, right? But it's like the book of Job, it's Job. You know, it's just some of these things that you learn over time. But it's the oldest psalm, and it's in Psalm 90. And Moses is going to talk about our time. He's going to talk about a more valuable resource, and he's going to be candid about it. And as we finish this series and we go into the Jesus way, he's going to want to reorient us and to help us understand the limited nature of our time. And so he starts here in Psalm 90. This is what he begins with. He says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. He's saying that through all the generations that have come before him, God has been the constant. God has been faithful. God has been true. And before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world from everlasting to everlasting. In other words, he wants to give us a glimpse of God. He wants us to understand not the finiteness, but the infinite nature of God. And so he continues into the next psalm. You turn your people back to dust. It seems like it takes a bit of a left turn here, saying, return to dust, you mortals. And some of you hear this and you're like, I knew God was a smiter, right? Because this is what we get in our heads, a vindictive God, or a God that isn't for our good, a God that wants to point out our flaws and show us how weak we are. But really, the writer Moses here is saying, understand that your days are numbered. We don't get to choose how many. We don't know how many, but they're numbered. And then he continues in verse 4 here. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, and like a watch in the night. In other words, our lives move fast. And as much as we want to grab hold of all the little moments, and those are good, and be present, we don't get the opportunity to know how long we have. And in comparison to Almighty God, in comparison to the one who created it all, the one who sustains it all, 1,000 years is like a day. And then he takes a really hard left turn. Are you ready for this one? Yet you sweep your people like the sleep of death. They are like the new grass of the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but by evening it's dry and withered. Life goes quick. And then next verse. Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and they fly away. In other words, life is brief. Life is short. And here comes the left turn of left turns. If we only knew the power of your anger, your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. Now, sometimes when you read through the Psalms, it seems as though it kind of jumps around. But one thing I love about the Psalms, one thing I love about this book of the Bible, and it's a collection of different poems. It's actually one of, if you know the band U2, if you don't, sorry. But it was actually Bono, the lead singer from U2. He loves the Psalms because he says they're the most honest religious writing. And so there's times that the psalmist is just going to say it like it is. And when it says, your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. And he's talking about the power of your anger. There's these moments where people choose to go in different paths against God. And so often we'll see in the Psalms, get my enemies and get after them. And you're like, I would never say that, even though when you're driving, you think it, right? But look at this, and this is where it hits the road. So we talked about the infinite God. We talked about the limited nature of our lives. And then he gets to the heart of the passage here. Look what he says. This is so important. Teach us to number our days. In other words, teach us to live with intentionality. Because if we're not careful, we squander the precious gift that time is. And we do this all the time. Teenagers are gifted at this. I'm astounded that 3 hours can go by and TikTok is still happening, you know? But college students, even adults, time, we can burn through it, no problem. But teach us to number our days. And look what he says, and this is the important connection point that I want to talk about today. Why would we do it? That we may gain a heart of wisdom. To understand the finite nature of our lives and the limited nature of our life is to understand that it doesn't last forever. And in light of that, well, then how should we live? Now, there's a person by the name of Bronnie Ware. She's a counselor for those who are about to pass away. She actually counsels those in the last 12 weeks of her life. And she wrote a number of different articles, and now it's made into a book. But she talks about the last regrets of those who are dying. And what's fascinating about her literature is she says that there's no mention of more sex or more money. There's no mention of bungee jumping or of driving in an F1 car, even though that would be amazing. Anybody with me? Some of you are like, no, not for me. But she gets down to, and I'm just going to share with you the top two that she talks about. We're going to start with number 2 and then go to number 1. But she talks about the last few days in somebody's life, the last 12 weeks and the last few years, and she's been with thousands and thousands of patients. And here's the number 2 thing that people wish, is I wish I hadn't worked so hard. They look back on their life and they realize the limited nature of it and how much time they spent working. And if you don't work, you don't eat. I totally get it. I'm not talking about progress, and I'm not slamming those of you that work hard. As a matter of fact, hard work is good. Anybody with me? Work hard and work hard, right? Let's work hard. But I want you to read this. And guys in the room, particularly with you, she comments on something. This is what she says. This came from every male patient that I nursed. They missed their children's youth and their partner's companionship. Women also spoke of this regret, but most were from an older generation. Many of the female patients had not been breadwinners. And so those in a different generation spent a lot of time working, wish they had worked less. So one is they wish they hadn't worked as much, and here's the number one regret. And before you put it on the screen, I think when we talk about time, what we typically do is how do we maximize our time? But in that idea of our life and how we live, there's also fidelity to self. And sometimes we overlook our own health, or we overlook who we are called to be or purposed to be for what we want to produce. And so this is the number one, as people look back on their life, regret that they had. Let's get that on the screen. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Now, if this doesn't speak about the abundant life that Jesus desires for his church. Now, if you're not a follower of Jesus and you're listening in and you're tracking and you're trying to figure it out, you get off the hook a little bit here, right? But for those of us that are followers of Jesus and he calls us into a new way, an abundant way, we must have the courage to live as our true selves. Not just dying or living on the expectations of others. And this is what she says. There's a quote here. This was the most common regret of all, when people realize that their life is almost over and look back clearly on it. It is easy to see how many dreams have gone unfulfilled. I don't know about you, but I love dreaming. I love it. Like possibilities, they're awesome. But there are some, because life has been challenging and difficult, that go, no, we can't dream. That's irresponsible. But I think when it comes to our lives, and I believe what Jesus wants us to do is to be our truest self before God and before others, and to help us navigate our time with wisdom. And so I'm going to circle back to a verse that we started with. And I believe the answer lies in these words of Jesus. And this is what he says in Matthew 6. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well. In the verses before, it talks about don't be concerned about what you eat or what you're going to drink. That as you seek God first and his kingdom, that he will help you reorient your life. Now, I always get a little bit nervous about illustrations. That's probably why I saved it for the last teaching of the series. But I just want to use this as an example. Now, I don't know where I heard this, but somebody shared it with me, and so I think it's helpful for us. Now, it's a small rock because I had to fit in the jar, okay? But we're just going to start with this as an example of who God is, okay? Now, you can try and pull some words of Jesus that you got to build your life upon the rock. It's probably a bigger rock than this, but this is the rock. And what we typically do is when somebody is pursuing God or is starting to follow Jesus, what we do is we say, God, this is who you are. I'm going to fit you into my existing life. But here's our lives, right? The sand is kind of the social media platforms, that Netflix series that you want to binge that you will never regret missing at the end of your life. It's those watching the Canucks games or the NFL or golf. Apparently, all these have all been touchy subjects recently. I got, I used Brett's email. I don't know if he got any emails from you, but these are the things that just in light of our whole lives don't matter all that much. But then these larger rocks are things like our work, things like our spouse, our kids, those friendships that we hold really dear. And what we try to do when we start following God is we just try fitting God in, right? Like, because that's what people do, is you just fit them in. And then we're like, got it. And this is how I see most people orienting their lives. And this is why it becomes difficult to prioritize the kingdom. It's because we try and just fit something in rather than build upon. And this whole series has been getting to this moment. And I believe the thing that we're talking about in our church, at Centerpoint Church this year, is how do we reorient ourselves around the things of God? Because when our priorities aren't right, then things don't work the way that they should. And here's what I hear a lot. If I fit God into the jar, I'm going to misplace something, or something's going to be displaced. And so I can't lose anything. Like, I can't give because I will have less, or I can't attend that small group because I got other things. And so we don't believe that God can fit in our jar. So we just take a little bit, just a little bit, right? But here's what I want you to see, is that when we orient our lives properly, it all fits. You see, I want you to think about your calendar for just a minute. Let's get really practical here. Let's start with first things first. What is the first thing we put on the calendar? If we're to seek God first, if you're a follower of Jesus, I don't think this is as optional. But how do we begin to orient our schedules around God? We put God first and label it. Maybe it's God time, God hangs. Maybe it's putting small group on the calendar. And rather than trying to fit God in, we place God in first. Thank God the jar didn't break. And then we take those other things like our work, and we place those things next on the schedule. Time with our spouse. If it's not on your schedule, pro tip, put it on there, okay? We put those into the calendar. We make time for those friendships. Maybe golf brings you a lot of life. Put that in, okay? Put that in, okay? Maybe for me, and you might laugh at this, it's repairing a motorcycle that I don't know if I'm ever going to ride. And I just keep turning different bolts, hoping for different results. Nothing's changing. But time with our kids, scheduling church on a Sunday morning, all those things, the things that are most important to us, we put in. And just in case you're wondering, they are the same amount of sand and rocks. And then, at the end, you know, that time that isn't necessarily those things that suck our time, like those Netflix series. We put those in last, right? We just slowly I'm just going to put my mic down, okay? Yeah, okay. Right? And when we orient ourselves properly, it all fits in the jar. And I think that's our lives. But here's the lie that we've lived, is that if I put things first, I'm going to have less. And I've never seen that true in my life one time. As a matter of fact, when I've got my life out of order, I feel out of order. Things are more stressful. There's more chaos. Relationships begin to slip. I lose my connection with God. I feel distant from those that are closest to me. And I used this term just a few weeks ago. I used this term that means turning back to God. It's the term repentance. And I said I haven't led well in this area. And this is one area of my life, reorienting my life, that I don't think God ever slipped down the order. I think I got that part right. But the part that I missed was putting the most important things in. Things like deep friendship, margin, to be able to move a friend on a Saturday, because who likes moving? Nobody. Let's just be honest, moving sucks, but with friends, it's tolerable, right? It's having the opportunity to have conversation, maybe to sit and just be with somebody. And in that space, we begin to create margin in our life, and God does something. It works for our finances, it works for our relationships, and it works for our schedules. Now, there are some things that we might have to remove. There might be some things, but there might be a lot of time that we're spending on things that don't matter all that much, that if we reorient our lives correctly, that God will use them to make sure that the most important things remain the most important things. So just a couple of, as we conclude this series and we talk about what's coming up ahead, we're doing a series called The Jesus Way. But in March and April, I'm pretty excited about it. We're going to be doing 40 days of focused reading together as a church corporately across all of our environments. We're getting kids curriculum going. We're getting hopefully youth stuff going. We're getting, I don't know why I said hopefully, we're getting youth stuff going. Maybe it's just Connor. Where's Connor? I was just looking at him. I'm like, okay, yeah, I think we talked about that. If not, surprise, here we go. But no, we didn't. But our adult environments, and here's the reason we're doing it, is we started Centerpoint a couple years ago. And one of the things that I noticed that we just didn't have was tradition. It's like, you know how you have Christmas traditions? And some of you, like me, we used to go to Boston Pizza or Pizza Hut on Christmas Eve. You know, that was what we used to do because all the services would end and then everyone had plans and my family we didn't schedule anything, so we'd be sitting at Pizza Hut. That was our thing. You know, we enjoyed it. But then we had other traditions like stockings or maybe have other traditions throughout the year. One of the things that we haven't implemented too many of are traditions. But one thing that we really want to see as a leadership team is us seek God together as a church. Every day, reading the same parts of the Bible, a quick prayer, a write-up, with your kids, with your spouse, with your teens. We just want to get our church all together. And so here's the cool thing. You want to hear something cool? I was like, God, if we're going to do this, it's just got to be a round number. And I'm like, 40. 40 just came to mind. I'm like, what are the chances of March 1st to Easter being exactly 40 days? Because if it is, we'll go with 40. It's 40. I thought that's pretty cool. But I believe that if we prioritize this as a church, that if we seek God together, that if we say, you know, there's a lot of other things that we could do, but we're gonna put this on the calendar. I'm just giving you a month in advance time. We're going to talk about it every week, but I believe that God could do something amazing in your life. Don't miss the chance to reorient yourself and to reprioritize your schedule. We've got small groups that are launching. There's so many great opportunities to get connected. I keep hearing, oh, one day. How about today? How about today we say, God, I'm going to put that stone in the jar. That's a priority for me because life is better connected. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the relationships that I have in my small group. I'm so excited for all the groups that are happening. Today's the day to get connected. So let's prioritize our schedule. And here's the cool part. Let's watch what God does when we do this. One, corporately as a church, but also individually in our lives and in our lives of our family. So church, as we conclude this series, let's make space. Let's prioritize God first in our schedule. What's most important second. And those things that aren't all that important, let them hit the schedule another time. But this is how we seek God first, practically. And this works relationally, this works financially, and this works with our time. So let's pray. God, I thank you so much for today. God, it's amazing how much we need to be together. And how awesome it is that we can come and we can sing about your goodness, your great love for us. And God, as we've talked today about making sure that we have space for you and for the important things in our life, God, I'd ask that you would help us and you would orient us around you. God, if it's taking out a schedule and redoing it, if it's about carving out time to sit down with a spouse, or if it's about even getting through discouragement, that God, you would encourage us at this time. I'd ask that as we talk about seeking you first, that God, you would encourage us, that you would lead us and you would guide us. God, we know that you are the infinite. We know that you have the best for us in mind. And we know that as we prioritize our life and orient ourselves around you, that God, you do amazing things in and through us. So God, in the lives of our church, in the lives of our community, God, would you do amazing things? For those that are on the fence about you or trying to figure out what does it look like to follow Jesus? What does it look like to seek him first? God, that as they maybe prioritize church, they prioritize a group, as they take that next step, God, that you would work in their life and encourage them, I pray. Amen. Amen. Cool. But hey, as we conclude today, we have small groups launching. Can anyone give me a whoop whoop for small groups? All right, we got a group link today. We got a lot of amazing groups. As Connor already said, that we have a high school group launching today. I think there's a number of different groups. You might not see all of our groups up because there are some existing ones that are closed. And we usually close a group around 12 people because then it becomes a medium-sized group. And so we want to keep it about 10 to 12 people. That's really perfect. Even less is better. But we have about 10 to 12 people. We've got a number of different groups launching today. A bunch of different interest groups, some in Walnut Grove, some in high school, a bunch of different stuff that's happening. And so in the foyer after service, there's a bunch of different tables out there that you can find more information about. Our goal today is that every person, can you say everybody? Everybody would get connected to a small group today. And you might be like, that sounds like a lot. But we want to do everything we can to get you in a group. So we do have a QR code up there that you can scan and you can see a list of our groups. They're live. You can go to the website or you can go into the foyer right now and meet some of our amazing group leaders. We just want to do whatever we can to get you connected. So again, you can QR code it up. Okay, you can scan it, pull out your phone right now, scan that. You can go into the foyer and you can meet our group leaders, or you can go onto our website. And so those are just a number of amazing options that are available. Life is better connected. So get out of rows, get into circles, get the jar right, all right? And you know what? I believe that it will be an amazing semester for you. There's so many amazing group leaders. I hope you have an amazing Sunday. I look forward to the Jesus Way next week. And just a teaser, we're starting out with the way of the wilderness. All right, so have an amazing week. We'll see you next week at Center Point Church.